podcast by a teacher for teachers and all things teaching, just for us to kind of commiserate together in this little corner of the internet. Thank you so much for being here. And if you have been here for all the episodes, thanks for coming back. If this is your first episode, well, you're in for just a classic wild ride because I have kind of had like a weird like tickle in my throat all day. Like I have a really bad headache. Like I decided that I was gonna cook dinner to get some energy because like cooking brings me joy and energy. So I was like, I'm gonna do that, and then I'm gonna go record for my podcast. I'm gonna do a quick little episode about something I've been thinking about, and then I'm gonna be done. So if I my voice sounds a little bit weird, I'm gonna take like water breaks and stuff. So just be aware of that. If that kind of stuff triggers you, then like whatever. On that note, if you're watching on my YouTube, you'll see that my hair is all discombobulated because I just feel kind of just like out of sorts. And today's my day to record. I like wanted to get better at planning this kind of stuff ahead, but with grad school and all the stuff I'm doing to my teaching job, it's just like hard to make time to do this. But I still do want to make time to do this. So if you're watching on YouTube, please ignore my hair and just like put this on in the background and don't stare at me because that would be wild for me to think about. And if you're watching or listening not on YouTube, go to my YouTube channel and please subscribe so I can get something going over there. Okay, thanks so much. Today I have been thinking about just like a bunch of different things, obviously, and I feel like I have a lot of things that I want to say that is now available on this like platform for me, but it's just like not always the right time to like go on like a big rant, and like days like today I don't really have the energy to go on like a big rant, and sometimes the ramifications of such a rant just means I have to like prepare a little bit more like emotionally, all this kind of stuff. So today I am going to kind of go through the question of like what makes someone a favorite teacher. Okay, because I was listening to a couple of podcasts this week. I've been like talking to kids, I've been like other my old students have been like reaching out to me, and it's just got me thinking. It's like, what does make a favorite teacher? What makes somebody a good enough teacher to be like, oh my God, yeah, I had this one teacher back in, elementary school, middle school, high school that I just loved so much and they were just like the best, right? So I kind of want to go through what those things are. And I'm going to ground that, of course, in like my own personal experience because that's all I have. Until I get more guests on here, whether it's like, teacher pals of mine or like former students or whatever. Um, Other bigger teacher creators would be great so they can, low-key help me build a platform, but we don't need to talk about that. All that said, I'm kind of going to go through like that journey. I'm going to go through just like two or three of like my favorite teachers that I've had in my career as a student and as a person, and then I'm going to kind of talk about like what they created and then like what I've always hoped to create in a classroom and what I think all teachers should aim to create in the classroom, because that's what like makes a favorite teacher. Okay. um the one thing that brought this up, and this is like between all my readings, all my working with like kids and grad school and all this stuff, is this idea of someday, if you're a teacher, someday, regardless of if you were their favorite, regardless of if you were barely on their radar for a while, like someday that student, that person is, 10, 15 years from now, going to be having a conversation with their friends or their families or whoever. And they're going to be like, yeah, like I had a teacher, Mr. Kassick, when I was in seventh grade. And they don't have to say anything else. The fact that you were a part of their journey as their teacher is just like such an honor. And I don't know how to encapsulate that experience like any more than, talking about like my favorite teachers and then kind of saying that it's still happening like to me, right? So it's the coolest thing about teaching is that regardless of your impact on them, whether it was like huge or tiny or whatever, and it's anywhere in between, right? Is someday, years from now, they're gonna be at a table, they're gonna be, chilling with their friends, hanging out with their families, and they're gonna be like, yeah, here are my teachers, and your name's gonna be there. And I don't know, there's just something about that that's like really cool to me that like regardless of whatever circumstance, regardless of what you taught them, regardless of anything that may have happened in their life, like someday they're going to be like looking back and you will be a part of that story. And that's just like such an incredible like honor. And I don't know. I can't really put that to words. And that's like the hardest thing about, making teaching content like that is that the things that I care about as a teacher are so much of like those little things that if you're not in it, you can't really explain it. And that's what this podcast is for. And that's what like my future teaching book is for. Is it's like it's explaining those little moments that you really just have to experience and feel. And I'm trying really hard to like display those in a way that like get people to realize what teaching really is, because it's not just standing in front of the classroom like assigning things and grading and lesson planning, and it's all those little tiny things, right? And that really brings me into like this conversation of what makes a favorite teacher, because I can think of two teachers in particular that like I look back on and have truly like impacted me and have been my favorites like through a long lasting time. And that's not to say that other teachers I've had like hadn't haven't impacted me, because lots of teachers have, and I can point to those as well, right? But it's like these two that it's just like there's just like something about it, like the specific moment, like it's the specific, area of your life that they kind of hone in on and help you with, and they kind of push you through. And these two teachers in particular are the ones that kind of did that for me. And every time someone's like, "Oh, who are your favorite teachers?" It's always these two that come up in in my mind. And I'm focusing purely on, K-12 education, because that's like what I deal with and teach. There were a handful of professors in college that like really changed my outlook on life and the world and teaching and everything. But um I don't really want to talk about that because I don't have my frame of reference for like what makes a good college professor. And you could argue that like, a good teacher is a good teacher regardless of the level. But I want to focus on um, K-12 because that's what I know best. So my first favorite teacher and the earliest teacher that I remember like looking back on was my fourth grade teacher. Her name was Mrs. Barr, and it's just like this compilation of like all these little things, right? I remember fourth grade just being like, I don't know, like a breath of fresh air, because third grade was like really rough for me. I would get like anxious and I would get like physically like in pain because of my anxiety as a third grader. And back in like 2003, nobody really knew that like anxiety could do that, or like that anxiety was even real. So back in like 2003, when I was like getting these stomach pains all the time, thinking about going to school and thinking about, all the, this one art teacher, I think I talked about her before on this podcast, but, thinking about all those things that just make it like so hard to exist for me when I was 8 years old. And just sorry, my cat's trying to jump up. You guys probably can't hear him. You can see it on the YouTube channel. Go subscribe, please. Um, anyway, it's that like that anxiety of third grade like really held me back. And in fact, I almost got held back because I got a letter from a principal that said, "Hey, if you miss any more school, like we're not going to be able to let you move on." And I was like, "First of all, I'm 8. Please don't scare me like that. That's insane." And, you know, I was really nervous about that. So, going into 4th grade, I kind of wanted to like start fresh, as much as I could as like a 8, 9-year old, 10-year old, I don't know. And I went into class, and it was just like different, like right off the bat. And I don't even know what specifically it was. I remember the teacher being like really welcoming. I remember she created like all these super cool like experiences for us. The biggest thing I remember in fourth grade is there was a flood at a like local senior home. And I don't know where the idea came from. I do not remember how it started. I don't remember like what, got my teacher inspired or us inspired to do it, but our class was kind of like the leaders of the time to like start a fundraiser for the damages to that like senior home. And we, got in touch with them. We did all the fundraising. I remember speaking on the announcements, and I was so nervous. I was literally the last one in my class to like, you know, get up the courage to like go and speak on the announcements in front of the whole elementary school. And I went to like a medium-sized public elementary school, so I don't know how many kids, probably like 1,500, I don't know. That's just an estimate. I have no idea. But out of all the fourth grade classes, it was like our job to like advertise for this fundraiser and like, sponsor the efforts to like bring these people back to, their lives, because the senior home was like basically destroyed, all but destroyed. And my teacher just kind of like let us do that, and she gave us the tools and the responsibility and the effort to like do that. And I remember just feeling like it was a really cool opportunity, and it was just a really awesome thing to be a part of. And I think my teacher has like a lot to go for that. On top of that, it's this idea of when I walked into that class, it was just like, I don't know, she was like always joking with me. She was always like, one, she was noticing me, which I think as a kid, in a lot of different capacities, this isn't, meant to be specifically about those kind of issues, right? But I just like wasn't like noticed as much. And I think having a teacher that like was able to like see me and recognize me and give me that space in a classroom was really cool. in fourth grade, I remember like I had this ruler and all these and all these other kids had these like bendy rulers because in like the early 2000s, like, if your pencil or your ruler just like is flexible, like apparently you're like the coolest kid in class. So mine was a wooden ruler and I wanted to fit in. So I held mine up and I was like, guys, mine can bend too. Mine can bend too. And I snapped it right in half and I threw it into my desk because I was so scared. And my teacher was just like, Josh, like, what are you doing? And she just like laughed about it. And that was a super cool like little moment because I had assumed I would be getting in trouble, right? Um, we were later on that year, towards the end, we went on like this big trip to I don't remember where. It was like we're like there was like a train and we got to like go in caves like miners. Which is like wild to put a fourth grader like in the caves. Anyway, we went on this big field trip and my dad was one of the chaperones and she calls me up because she was like, "Hey, who do you want in your group?" And I was like, "I don't really know, like whoever." Like it was really hard for me to like pick because all of my friends at the time were like, trying to get me to go in their group, and like they were like, "Oh my God, Josh, like let me be in your group, let me be in your group." Not gonna lie, I kind of peaked in fourth grade. I kind of peaked in like fourth and fifth grade, like socially, and from there it's just been a wild downhill spiral. So all these people were like trying to be in my group or whatever. And a fact about me, if you don't know this about me, is, and why would you? I haven't spoken about it on the podcast. Is when I was a kid, like most of my friends were girls. Like I didn't have a lot of like guy friends, and I just was around them all the time. So that's where I felt comfortable. I had a little sister. It probably had something to do with it, but most of my friends were like girls like my entire life, even all the way up through high school, college, and even now. The idea is my teacher called me over and she was like, "Who do you want in your group?" And I was like, "I don't know." And she looks at me and she's like, "You can pick whoever you want, Romeo." And she called me that because I was like hanging out with all these girls and like I never really in fourth grade really knew what that meant. So, but I thought it was funny. And I remember like specifically we were watching a movie on like the big TV set with like the VHS tapes and we had like the VHS player like on a big cart. Like if you're if you're a millennial, like you know what the big cart means, okay? You know what the big cart means when they pull it into your class. So she put on this big movie and we're all sitting and she's like, "Hey, I'm gonna like call you guys up if you're like one of your parents are chaperoning so we can get groups all set up." And she pulls me over and she was just like being really silly goofy about it. And I just remember like feeling like accepted and okay and safe in that moment. um I don't remember who was in my group, not gonna lie, but I remember being a big point of contention. And later on that year, and I think this is when I realized, like, I didn't even realize how much she had impacted me until I had brought up my yearbook for her to sign. And I was like, "Hey, can you like sign my yearbook?" Like little chubby little ginger 8 year old me like walks up to her and I have my signing page open and she like closes it and then she reopens it to like the page where all the class portraits are to sign. And she wrote in my yearbook, she was like, "You were always one of my favorites," with like a little heart. And I looked at that and I was like, "Are you serious? Like, what do you mean? Me? Like, me? Are you sure? Like, this guy, this kid?" And it was like that moment where like my perspective of all of it like really changed because like I said, I don't think I, as a student or even like as a person in some capacities, really realized like what it was to like be noticed. And it was really cool that like that was the first teacher that like took the time to like really know me, like really understand like what I needed, and just to not take anything too seriously, and then to like write something like that in my yearbook. It was like the simplest little sentence, but it was the coolest thing in the world just to like see that that level of care and attention was allowed and was given to me. And it was just a really cool, um, it's a really cool moment for me. So anytime someone's like, "Who's your favorite teacher?" It was Mrs. Barr in fourth grade. And I have reached out to her since then. And I've been like, "Oh my God, I don't know if you remember me." I don't know. This was like a handful of years ago when I was getting into teaching, is I like reached out to her. And I don't remember how I found her email or whatever. I was like, "Oh my God, I don't know if you remember me," like blah, 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 blah. I don't remember if I heard anything back. If I did, I have it saved somewhere, but maybe I'll look around if I, feel like it. And throughout middle school, I think I had a couple of really, like, I had a bunch of really good teachers in middle school, but I think middle school for me, like, in a lot of ways, like, I didn't really have that teacher in middle school. And maybe that's why I, like, am so drawn to middle school now and, like, creating these opportunities for middle schoolers now. But in middle school, I really didn't have, like, that teacher that, took the extra time and attention and effort to, like, notice or care about me like that. Um, But I did have a lot of really good teachers. There's just like none of them stand to that level of like, oh my God, they're my favorite. Like I liked all of them just fine. And there were a handful of them that like did impact me in a lot of ways. But like I said, in middle school, I really didn't have like that person for me. And I think that's why I try really hard to be that in middle school because I think that's the time where kids need it most is they really need that guiding light in middle school. They really need that person to say like, "Hey, like I am here and I support you and I value you," because at that time in your life like you're just the most little fragile, emotional little being that you will ever be in throughout your entire life is in middle school. And just to have someone there that says like, "I noticed that and that's okay." And let me just be a space for you. So I didn't have that in middle school, but I hope that I was able to create that in middle school for some people. And one would be enough. And as we get into high school, my favorite teacher in high school, and this is probably the one that like impacted my direct journey to teaching the most. Her name is Mrs. Bynarowicz, and she taught me in a class my freshman year. She taught me in my English class my sophomore year, and she taught me in AP Lit my senior year. So even just like that, and that wasn't even by choice. That was all completely random, right? I went to a pretty big high school. I think there was only 500 kids in my class, so I guess that's not like that big but relatively to some other schools that exist, right? But out of 500 kids in a class, like to have that one teacher like a handful of times was a really just kind of like rare opportunity. And I didn't go out of my way to like make that happen. It just kind of like happened by chance. And I think I realized my freshman year, it wasn't like an English class. It was a class that kind of like prepares you for like, it was a career in STEM. It was like public speaking. It was like research based. It's like an honors level class that kind of just focused on all of these like 21st century skills. And in 2009, that was like all the rage. One of my favorite classes I've ever taken, like to this day in my life, because it challenged me a lot and I was desperately like needing that. So this teacher, like she held us to like really high expectations and I like appreciated that in ninth grade. But in 10th grade, um, throughout like a bunch of other reasons or sicknesses and personal things that were going on in that time, I missed a lot of school again. And call it anxiety, call it like legit sickness, like I don't really remember. But she had come over to me one day. We were sitting in like world history, world studies, whatever it was, and she came over to my desk and she said, "Hey, like, how are you? Like, how you been?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm fine." She's like, "Oh, I just like noticed that you've been absent a lot more recently, and I'm just like really curious, like, just making sure you're like okay." And I was like, "No, like I'm fine. I've just been sick." I remember this moment as well, like super vividly, like because it was like a group activity that I had missed the start of, and like I hate group activities in the first place, so I was like already behind. So I was just like doing work from like earlier that I had already missed. And she came over and she was like, "Hey, just like based on last year, like you were here all the time, and like this year you just like haven't been around as much. I'm just checking in, making sure you're okay." And it's one of those things like now as a teacher, I you don't always do consciously. You just kind of like walk up to students and then kind of like recognize things and you take notice of certain things and there's no really rhyme or reason to it. You just kind of walk up and be like, "Oh, like how are you? Thanks so much for being here." And it's because of this moment when I was a 15, 16-year-old sophomore in high school that this teacher came over to me and she was like, "Hey, like I'm just like, are you good? I'm just checking in, just making sure everything's okay." Was something that I like think about every single day in my 10-year teaching 9-year teaching career is every day I've walked into the classroom and I've kind of looked around and just made sure to like take that moment to check in with a kid and say like, "Hey, like how are you?" Just making sure if their head is down or if they're a little bit more antsy than usual or if they just look a little bit sad or if they have been absent for a long time. It's just that little check-in that makes like a big difference in them. And I recognize that because I had a teacher that did that for me. And it's just like I said, I remember that moment like so vividly even now. And that was like what, 15, 16 years ago at this point, which is insane. So it was that moment that I was like, okay, this is a person that like cares for me and notices me. And um from there, she was again my AP Lit teacher my senior year of high school. And I've kind of alluded to like this in my teaching journey episode is like my first episode of kind of like how I got here. She was the one that kind of encouraged me to, you know, one, get interested in reading and get interested in writing because she kind of guided me through what it actually means to like read and write. She like made it okay that it wasn't easy. She like made it okay that I had to write certain things down to make sure it stuck in my mind. Like she taught me all about annotating, which I have a whole episode about. She was the one who kind of pushed me to do things that were outside of my comfort zone. Like we did an internship that year that she helped me with, and I like interned at the paper, the local like city paper, because I wanted to be a journalist. She gave me a book that like changed my life. Writing Down the Bones by Natalie Goldberg completely changed like my trajectory of like how I view writing. And as I, still write to this day, like that book is something that just like informed the core of who I am. And she just handed it to me one day and she's like, yeah, like this is a really good book. Like I used it when I was a kid. And that's the thing about like what makes a good teacher. And I'm going to get into like these qualifications here in a second, right? Is it's like you don't even like have to think about it and you change someone's life. It's a simple thing of like, here's a book I think you'll like, or hey, are you okay? It's just those simple like little moves that you make that you don't even necessarily realize or focus on that make the biggest difference. And I think that's what makes someone a good teacher, but then also like a favorite teacher, right? And then from there, I guess you can say like the rest is kind of history because that's what ignited my like love for writing, which ignited my, desire to go and teach others about it, which then, brought me here, which then got me to teaching, which then got me to do all those clubs, which then got me to like this point to then, starting my counseling career, right? Like it's just snowballs. Like it's like that butterfly effect, like a butterfly like flaps its wings and then, earthquakes or whatever. That's like what the butterfly effect is if you don't know. Maybe it's not called that. But anyway, when I look back on like really formative experiences for me, like as a person, is it's these two teachers because they just like recognized me and they like let me be what I needed to be and they supported me in that. And it was just like a super like looking back now, like as an adult, like looking back and realizing those impacts is just like a really super cool thing. And I can only hope to do like a tenth of what those two teachers did for me. And that kind of leads me into like what makes a favorite teacher. So if we take the qualities of like these two that like impacted me, I think the biggest thing is I should probably make a list of these. I'm probably going to repeat myself. I don't know how many I'm going to think of. So this is literally off the cuff, you guys. this is we just go by vibes here. This is my corner. We just go by vibes. And the first thing that comes to mind is just like the noticing, right? Like I think your favorite teacher or a favorite teacher is someone who's going to notice you for all that you are and they're going to take notice that they care about you, right? It's this idea of, hey, I see you here and I appreciate that you're here. And both of those teachers in my life like have done that. And a lot of other teachers have, like I said, like these are not like this is not an exhaustive list, but it's these two that really made me realize that it's something that really super helps. And I can probably imagine any of y'all's favorite teachers have done the exact same thing. They just like make you feel seen and they notice you and they do that in a way that like makes you feel cared for. And that is the most important thing because you can't learn if you feel unseen. You can't learn if you feel uncared for. You can't learn if you don't feel safe. And that's what a favorite teacher does, regardless of who yours is. I think another quality is just like I guess noticing you, but I guess safety, like in their space, right? Like you should walk into that room and not feel like anxiety. Coming into fourth grade after like a really exhausting, anxious ridden third grade year, my poor little 8-year-old self was just like going through it. And when you're when you feel that way like about school, stepping into a new classroom is like daunting and scary and all these things, right? I don't remember ever feeling anxious in fourth grade. I don't remember ever feeling anxious when I was thinking about going into Miss Bynarowicz class in high school. I just like I knew that it was a place where like I could go and not feel the burden of God just existing that I felt like everywhere else. And that's like a really big thing. Um, Third, I think like trust, right? I talk a lot about And I have like a big mantra about like trusted adults and all of these things. And as a kid, this is gonna get like real sad for like a second. Um, I don't know if I had like a trusted adult that I could like go to talk to. I had my parents and I had, I guess that's it. I had my parents that I could go to, like, if, bad things happen, but there wasn't really like a thing that said, hey, like go and talk to this person if you're like feeling sad or if you're really excited about something, right? Like, and to be honest, like I'm not really that person anyway, and I don't know that I needed that when I was a kid. And it's, this isn't therapy. Like I can pay a counselor for all of this. Um, but the idea of this ability to like trust somebody, right? And the ability to have like an adult in your life that you can like go to that you trust is just like such an immensely important thing. And as a kid, I didn't know what that was or that it was okay to have one or it was okay to like want one. But I think these two kind of definitely emphasize that fact of if I needed to, I probably could have gone to them with some of the things I was struggling with, especially in high school, right? Like as you grow into yourself in high school and as you like develop and grow, like you really get stuck in like the way that things are. And I think it would have been super helpful for me to like reach out to those people and just ask for resources. And that's what I strive to do now is to be that person. And granted, I know more about it now and I'm trained to do it now. But when I was a kid, if I knew that that was an option, these two teachers would have been that person to go to. I would have been like, hey, like, can I chat with you real fast? Like, I felt okay asking them for help on things where I didn't with other teachers. And, maybe I should have taken that opportunity because I think things would have like been a little bit different. But, it's that facet of like trust that you have to have in like your favorite teacher that it's like, I feel safe here. I feel noticed here. I can trust you. And you don't take those things lightly, right? Um, One of the other things is like challenge. And this is maybe specific to me. This is more specific to like what I needed, I think, in school, is I needed someone to like challenge me academically because school was like always super easy for me. Not going to lie. Like I kind of skated through and I didn't try super hard and I got pretty good grades. I think I ended high school with like a 3.7 GPA, which by no means is like extraordinary, right? But it's definitely above average. And the fact that I just like kind of coasted along, like school is easy. And I'm not, boasting about it. I'm just saying it like it is. And in fourth grade and in high school, I think I regardless of like any exceptionalities or giftedness that I had, I think I just wanted school to like be more because it was my whole life. Like I didn't care to get a job. I played soccer, but it's like it wasn't something I kind of just did that for fun. I never expected to take me anywhere. So I really just wanted like that academic, that like rigor that allows you to like find the success and find the things that you're good at. And that's the thing that I valued in both of them because they both kind of like push me outside of my comfort zone academically. And not only that, but they kind of both push me out of my zone, like, emotionally, mentally, things like that too, because of the fact that, they just like notice me. And that was kind of uncomfortable for me to like be perceived. To this day, it's still something I don't love. And I guess that kind of leaves us with like four things. And like I said, I didn't know how many I would think of because this is off the cuff. I'm probably gonna like end this and think of like a bajillion more. But it's these qualities that I think teachers naturally have if you're a good teacher. And it's just simple like that. And I say simple because a lot of these things like my teachers didn't have to actively plan for. Like there wasn't any lesson plans for these things. There wasn't any, big moment that crafted these things. It was just them being like a good person. It was just them being like a good and aware teacher that allowed me to like feel safe and protected and seen and trusted. And that's what makes them like my favorite teachers, right? And as I've gone through like my career as a teacher, it's those two that I've kind of like emulated the most. And because that's like my frame of reference, right? And there's this like teaching thing that is kind of like an old adage, and I don't know that I agree with it. I don't know, I've definitely talked about it to someone somewhere at some time, but it's this idea of be the teacher you needed when you were a kid. And I don't always love that because I think the teacher I am in, a public setting or in front of the whole classroom is not the teacher that I would have loved when I was a kid. Um, I think I am more chaotic than I needed as a kid. I think I am just like a bigger goofball than I needed when I was a kid. Like I think my class had this like mentality of like, oh, like it's so chill, it's so fun, like it's crazy, and it's like, kind of unpredictable. Like as a kid, I would have hated that. Honestly, going into my class, like I would have not enjoyed that, not gonna lie. But I did need a teacher like me in the capacities of, are you okay? Do you need anything? What can I help you with? I hope you feel safe here. And regardless of everything that I said before, of like what I wouldn't need or like as a kid in my overall style, I definitely needed someone in my life to come up to me and say, how are you? Are you okay? Can I help you with anything? And it's that mentality that I try to bring into like my classroom. So while that old adage of be the teacher you needed when you were a kid is kind of complete garbage, like I don't think that's who you need to be. But it does kind of help you put a frame of reference on things, right? It's like that's the only way that I knew how life existed and life worked. And I just want to make sure that the kids who were like me, who were like kind of quiet off to themselves, I just really hope that they get noticed and they have felt the same way, because that's what I needed when I was a kid. And I hope that I can provide that. But I don't know if I agree with that adage of be the teacher you needed when you were a kid. It's just something I think about sometimes, because in a lot of ways I am, but like in a lot of other ways, like I'm not. And that's just my persona and how it's developed. And I think that leaves us at a good stopping point. I can't believe that was already 30 minutes. I'd be yapping, okay? Like I came on here with like zero plan, like literally zero plan, and I was able to talk for 30 minutes. Imagine when I finally get my shit together and this is a planned and productive podcast. You know what I mean? Just imagine. Imagine the world of possibilities when all this stuff comes together, and it just makes sense. Um, Thanks so much for being here. Thanks so much for listening. I'm really proud of you. I hope you're doing well. If you have some of your favorite teacher stories that you want to drop in any of the comments in any of the platforms, YouTube, leave a review on Apple Podcasts, leave a review anywhere. Follow me on TikTok, follow me on all the things at Kassick's Corner, Kassicks Corner, just like you spell corner. And I want to hear about them, right? I want to hear about your favorite teacher stories, regardless of, if they're anything like mine and what qualities you think make a great teacher. I just want to get some engagement. Hit me up, slide into those DMs. They're unfortunately open. They're wide open, bro. So let me know what your thoughts are on favorite teachers, who your favorite teachers are. Shout them out in the comments, because we need more of that positivity around, right? It's rough out there. So I hope to see you in the next one. Thanks so much for listening. And this is an outro.